Imagine waking up to blinking monitors in a hospital where the hallway lights feel a shade too dim, an ambulance engine idling outside because there's nowhere safe to deliver its patient. Somewhere else in a sealed room you'll never see, steel spins at impossible speed, then slows, then spins again, the way a pulse flutters just before it fails. And on a quiet afternoon in San Francisco, a website known for code goes strangely silent as an invisible tide slams into its shore. Tonight, 3 cases, 3 ways code jumped the rails and reached into the physical world. If you want to know how these attacks actually worked, why they succeeded, and why their shadows still fall across everything that plugs in, this is your night. Case 1, May 2017, the ransomware that stopped hospital heartbeats. You've heard the name whispered in cautionary tales, WannaCry. It wasn't the most sophisticated ransomware ever written, but it was perfectly timed and catastrophically contagious. Let's trace the ripple from the first contact to the final tally, initial foothold. This worm used a flaw in a common Windows service that lets computers share files on a network. Think of it like an open door in a busy office corridor. If you hadn't installed a specific security update, the door was still open. WannaCry didn't start with a clever email. It started with scanning, machine after machine, pressing on that door to see which ones would swing inward without a key, escalation. Once it found a machine, the worm didn't stop to celebrate. It took that inner hallway and sprinted, it copied itself, then began probing neighboring computers for the same weakness. That's what made it a worm no human had to click. Imagine a spark hitting dry grass and the wind doing the rest. In networks where the update had been delayed, or where outdated systems were still alive in forgotten corners, the fire line curved fast. Payload. The encryption began. One by one, files were locked, folders transformed into puzzles with no edges, and a bright, crude ransom note demanded payment in cryptocurrency. It wasn't subtle. It didn't have to be. This was smash and grab digital extortion at industrial scale. Pay us, the note said, or watch your data remain a sealed vault. Impact. By the time responders fully understood the shape of the blaze, more than 200,000 machines across roughly 150 countries had been marked. In the United Kingdom, hospitals canceled thousands of appointments, diverted ambulances, and stared at screens that wouldn't cooperate. Some surgeries were delayed, nurses double-wrote charts. Managers dragged old printers and fax machines back into service because paper doesn't negotiate with ransomware. Globally, the damages were counted in the hundreds of millions, then billions, depending who you ask and how far you trace the tales of lost time. WannaCry was contained eventually by what looked like luck. A researcher noticed the code checking a peculiar web address and registered it, accidentally tripping a kill switch baked into the malware. But that's cold comfort if your network was still burning when the switch flipped. Why did it succeed? Not because it was unbeatable, but because it didn't need to be. It relied on something as old as computing, uneven updates, legacy systems paired with modern ones, and the unavoidable fact that big organizations don't move at one speed. The lesson speaks with the patience of a metronome: patch, backup, segment. If the fire can't jump the wall, it dies on its own side. And take special care with the dusty corners of your network you'd rather not think about. They remember you even when you forget them. There's a darker echo here. WannaCry spread because it could. It asked for no permission, no click, only an unlatched door. When we connect everything, we inherit the burden of every hinge. Case 2, a different theater, a different tempo. In a facility few people can name, row after row of centrifuges once spun at blurs of sound, separating the world's most stubborn material the way a DJ isolates a single beat in a storm of noise. Enter a worm later named Stuxnet, an instrument built not to steal your files or sell your secrets, but to break something real while smiling for the cameras. Here, the timeline tightens like a looped thread: initial foothold, escalation, payload, impact. Initial foothold: the target network wasn't connected to the public internet in the ordinary way. Think of it as an island with watchers on the beach. But islands still get mail, they still get visitors. Stuxnet is widely believed to have crossed the water by riding a common ferry, a USB drive. Not dropped into the facility from the sky, not teleported, just handed across by an unsuspecting person doing an ordinary job, plugging a familiar little stick into a familiar little port. This is what makes it terrifying. There are no lasers, only logistics. One moment of convenience is all it takes, escalation. Once the code reached a machine that could talk to the industrial controllers, the small, obedient computers that tell machines when to spin and how fast it put on a barred badge. It used previously unknown flaws, the kind we call 0 days, because no one has seen them before, and it carried drivers signed with certificates that made them look legitimate. That legitimacy opened doors inside the island. It spread carefully, slowly, staying quiet unless it found the exact equipment it wanted. It didn't roar, it whispered, it learned how the system looked when things were normal and memorized those rhythms like a thief learning a guard's route, payload. When the music started, only the code knew the tune. At intervals designed to create not an explosion, but exhaustion, the controllers received confusing instructions. The centrifuges spun faster than was safe, then slower, wobbling at the edge of the safe zone, while the monitors displayed the same placid numbers as before. It's like altering the speedometer so the needle says 40 while you drift toward 80. The machines strained against their own metal, bearings wore, shafts struggled. Over time, a quiet crackle of failure, impact. The number you'll hear varies depending on the source, but the story resolves the same way. Hundreds of centrifuges were taken out of service. A clandestine timetable was disrupted by code that masqueraded as routine. The worm eventually surfaced outside the island and drew global attention when security firms found it and began to unspool the thread. But by then, the point had been made. A worm can sabotage the physical world if it knows the language, and the language of machines is learnable. What made Stuxnet succeed? It exploited gaps between the office and the factory floor, between convenience and caution, between what's seen and what's actually happening. The lesson isn't only for facilities with specialized machinery. It's for anyone who uses removable media, who trusts what a screen says without checking the source, who assumes that because something isn't online in a browser, it's safe. There's a particular chill in watching numbers lie so cleanly. Trust, once broken, takes forever to heal, and it never quite forgets the fracture. Half a world away and 2 years later, a different kind of pulse. No espionage theatrics, no physical sabotage, just raw bandwidth turned into a hammer. February 2018, a site known to millions of engineers and hobbyists stuttered under the weight of one of the largest distributed denial of service attacks ever recorded. Here's how a public good, a tiny, helpful server feature became a slingshot. Initial foothold, the attackers didn't need to plant a backdoor or steal a password. They needed to find systems running a kind of memory cache, a tool meant to speed up websites by holding popular data in quick reach. Some of these caches had been left exposed to the public internet with a feature that answered questions over a protocol that didn't check who was really asking. It's like building a giant megaphone on your lawn and trusting that only you will ever speak into it. The attackers looked for those megaphones and found thousands. Escalation. With a bit of trickery, they made their own requests look like they came from the victim. Then they whispered into the megaphones. A small whisper became a thunderclap aimed back at the target. That's amplification. You send a little, you get a lot. That's reflection. You aim at a helper, and the helper unknowingly aims at the victim. No malware is needed, no compromised laptop army. Just misconfiguration and physics payload. The responses rolled in a tidal wave of traffic measured not in gigabits, but in terabits per second. For a few intense minutes, the target was effectively shoved off the internet, like a storefront where the door can't open because a crowd is pressed tight against the glass. The attack peaked around 3 terabits per second, a record at the time. then was blunted by scrubbing center's big filtering stations designed to catch and throw away the garbage while letting the legitimate requests pass through. The site stabilized, the storm moved on, impact, the downtime was short, measured in minutes, and the direct costs were far less than what a hospital outage can rack up. But the lesson echoed loudly: if a misconfigured system is an open faucet, someone will try to twist it on all the way. For a while after, a larger wave around 1.7 terabits per second hit another target using the same trick. Administrators scrambled to disable the risky feature or block it. This was a story not of villainy at scale, but of defaults, documentation, and the long tail of well-meaning software meeting the reality of the public internet. The best attackers exploit what we collectively forget to lock down. If this kind of forensic untangling pulls you in, subscribe to Cybercase Files and stay with us. It helps more people see these lessons before the next breach. Across these three cases, a pattern emerges like a watermark in old paper. Not a single mastermind's signature, but a simple arithmetic of opportunity. In one, neglected updates and flat networks let a worm run. In another, a removable drive and quiet, careful code bent machines to a hidden rhythm. In the third, exposed helpers became unwitting battering rams. The details differ, the themes rhyme. Convenience is the most tempting door, speed is the most dangerous ally. And silence, when we don't log or monitor, is the perfect cover. Timelines tell us where to intervene. In the WannaCry story, the initial foothold was a known weakness that had a patch available months before the outbreak. That's a hard truth and a hopeful one. Known problems can be fixed if we make fixing them a habit instead of a chore. In Stuxnet's arc, the foothold was a human routine, a USB stick bridging to worlds that can be hardened without killing productivity, dedicated, scanned meteor. Policies that make it slightly inconvenient to plug unknown devices into sensitive systems. Alerts that trip when something unusual starts to talk on the industrial side. In the DDoS episode, the foothold was a misconfiguration and an assumption that a service would be used as intended. We can audit those assumptions on a schedule, the way we test smoke alarms. The escalation in each case exploited trust. Trust that an internal network is safe. Trust that a signed driver is honest. Trust that a helper service is private by custom, even if not by configuration. If you can't eliminate that trust, measure it and constrain it. But what about payloads, the part of the story that does the harm? The payload teaches restraint. Not all ransomware is a nail. You don't need to swing a hammer at everything that looks like malware in the same way. Segment your networks so a worm can't turn a single room into an inferno. Keep regular offline backups so the ransom note doesn't set the price of your future. In facilities, watch the physical signals and the digital ones. If a system says a machine is steady while the vibration signature suggests otherwise, believe the vibration and investigate. On the open internet, prepare for crowds you didn't invite. If your presence is critical, consider a provider who can absorb floods and keep you standing when someone tries to push you down. Impact is the end of the arc, the part that translates code into dollars lost, hours vanished, appointments canceled, hardware replaced. But impact isn't just what's measurable. It's the nurse who has to call a family and change the plan because her tools are failing. It's the engineer who hears a centrifuge misbehave and learns to doubt the screen that told him everything was fine. It's the developer who sees a site blink off and wonders which corner of the internet is about to be weaponized next. When we talk about cyberattacks, we can get trapped in numbers. The human cost is where those numbers sting. Before we close, the 3 practical takeaways anyone can carry, whether you run a hospital network, a workshop with a single specialized machine, or a home office with a single laptop. First, updates are oxygen. Turn on automatic updates wherever you can. Schedule restarts instead of procrastinating them. Pair that with offline or offsite backup copies that ransomware can't touch, so you always have a way back that doesn't involve paying a stranger. If you're responsible for a network, segment it. Put fire breaks between departments and between old machines and new ones so a worm can't sprint a marathon in seconds. Second, raise the price of entry with multi-factor authentication. It won't stop a worm that doesn't need a password, but it will starve 1,000 other attacks that try to borrow your identity. Use it on your email, your cloud services, anything that matters. Combine that with least privilege. Accounts only have the access they need for the job they do, and admin rights are rare and temporary. If someone steals a key, let them open as few doors as possible. Third, verify the unexpected. A USB drive on your desk is an unknown until proven otherwise. A sudden instruction to change a process, a call from IT asking you to plug something in, a request to bypass a control check it out of band with a voice you trust. That simple pause catches more attacks than clever software ever will. For individuals, this also means treating every pop-up, every plugin, and every too-good-to-be-true request as if it were training for a day you hope never comes. We live in a connected age built on millions of small decisions. WannaCry didn't win because it was brilliant. It won because the world is busy and imperfect. Stuxnet didn't need to shout. It slipped into a routine and stayed on beat until the machines began to slip off theirs. The 2018 DDoS didn't need a botnet of compromised homes. It borrowed power from the systems that were always meant to help. These aren't ghost stories, they're field notes. And they suggest a way forward that isn't paranoid or punishing. It's disciplined and a little slower. It gives future you the gift of a boring day when the unusual knocks on the door. So imagine again that hospital hallway, the centrifuge room, the quiet San Francisco office. The blinking stops, the numbers on the monitor match the hum you feel in your bones. The site stays up through a storm because the storm hits a wall built weeks earlier. Cybersecurity isn't about fear, it's about time buying it, saving it, using it wisely. The best defense is often just the right habit repeated, the right question asked, the right door latched before someone else tries the handle. And in that quiet, the city runs, the machines sing, and the tide rolls in and back out without pulling the shore away.